Hi everyone. Today we're gonna talk about the fascinating world of the international relations. Have you ever wondered what motivates the states to behave in certain ways on the global stage? Well, we'll focus precisely in this video about these theories. Firstly, we'll focus on the most influential theories on international relationships, as like the realism, also the liberalism, constructivism, and critic theory. So, firstly, I will talk about the realism. So, actually, this is a theory that posits that international relations are dominated by conflict and competition among sovereign states or countries. So, according to the realists, this is due to the very nature of power and anarchic structure of international systems. So, realists also believe that human nature is inherently selfish and competitive. So, uh, this is reflected in how states act on the global stage. Furthermore, the lack of central authority in the international system means states must pursue their natural interest and security on their own, so often at the expense of other states. So this perspective actually is roots in the works of thinkers such as Thucydides, Machiavelli, and also Hobbes. So Thucydides, for example, documented in Peloponnesian War and emphasized the role of power and security in international affairs. So in the 20th century, also figures like Hans Morgenthau and Kenneth Waltz further developed realist ideas. So Morgenthau is work Politic Among Nations and argued that the politics and international politics are governed by objective laws based on human nature, basically. So, meanwhile, Waltz introduced the concept of structural realism or neo-realism, which focuses on how the anarchic structure of the international system influences the behavior of the states. So, however, like realism is not without its criticisms. It has been actually questioned for its pessimistic view and for underestimating the role of international cooperation and also for institutions in the global area. So there are other alternative theories that argue other perspectives. So, for example, we're going to talk about the constructivism, which argues that international relations are also shaped by ideas, norms, and identities. So, let's talk a little bit more about this.
To the issue contribution of the liberalism theory to national security from an international perspective. The liberalism places significant emphasis on cooperation, international institution, and economic interdependence, and finally the promotion of democracy as means to achieve security. The first question about the issue is who would you explain the concept to the liberalism in international relation to a 10 years old? I explain to the child, for example, that liberalism is in international relations is like all the countries in the world being friends in a school who work together, share things, and follow the rules to avoid fights. They believe I die if the each other trade fairly and choose good leaders. Everyone can live in peace of the soul their problems by taking instead of fighting. And the second question is describe their three examples of how liberalism addresses an issue of national security from an international perspective. International institutions, obviously, the UN and peace in Liberia. The liberalism holds that international institutions are crucial for managing global security. These institutions facilitated cooperation between states, promote the peaceful resolution of conflicts, and help maintain international peace of security. In this issue, Liberia and the UN, after years of civil war in the Liberia, the intervention through the United Nations mission in Liberia in 203 played the essential role in the country's pacification and reconstruction progress in all process. The UN facilitated the disarmament and the mobilizations and reintegration of the ex-combatants, supervised elections, and support security sector reform. This example illustrated how an international institution can effectively intervene to restore security and stability in the state affected by internal conflicts. The second example is economic interdependence relations between China and United States. The liberalism argues the economic interdependence between states reduced to the likelihood of conflicts. The theory suggests that when countries are economically like they have more incentives to maintain peaceful and cooperation relations of conflicts who hurt their interconnected economies. China and United States, for example, despite political and strategic tensions, China and the United States maintain to the deep and complex economic relationship. Both countries are major trading partners and have significant investments in each other. This economic interdependence acts as a moderating factor that, to the some extent, contains political and military tensions. Over the years, despite trade disputes and the other frictions, the economic relation has forced both countries to define ways to match their difference without resorting to the direct confrontation. And the next issue is promotion on democracy. The European Union to the enlargement to the east. Liberalism also holds that the promotion of democracy contributes to the international security under the premise that democracies tend not to the go guard with each other. Democracy peace theory. And for example, the enlargement of the European Union. The expansion of the European Union towards Eastern Europe after the Cold War is the significant example how the promotion of democracy of the regional integration can strengthen security. The EU has pushed to the democracy, economic, and legal reforms in countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic in their accession progress. This not only politically established these countries, but also create an environment of the peace and cooperations in regions previously affected by tension and conflicts. Integration into the EU has been a tool for consolidating democracies and reduced security threat in Europe. Um, and finally, from the perspective of liberalism in international relations, national security is approached through the promotion of international cooperation, economic interdependence, and the democracy. For examples, of UN intervention in Liberia, economic relation between China and United States, and Euro-Union enlargement to the east, demonstrate how this literal principle can contribute to the global stability and security, international cooperation, interdependence, and democracy, and not only mitigate security threats, but also promote on a more peaceful and stable global environment. Thank you.
So now, after exploring liberalism and its implication, it's essential to reflect on its theory and its focus on cooperation among states, right? So, however, some critics also argue that it may underestimate tensions and conflicts in international relations. So, now we will delve into another key theory, which is constructivism. This perspective actually considers how ideas, identities, and norms influence. International relations. So let's hear about it.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the constructivism in the international relation. It's a social theory to assert that the significant aspects of the relations between the nations are determined by ideationally factors and which are historically and social constructed, but is not simple by material factors. Okay, in this case, the constructive international relation is a theory considers that elements of relations between the nations are social constructed, but in the words, the nations, national interests, and the relationship between these elements are rotating the human ideas about them. But it's not just the material factors. We are some real examples from an international perspective. The first example is the banning the landmines. The activities by transactional advoice groups leads to norm to ban the landmines, but this regulation was based on the shared belief and the prolonged harm to civilian population and the environment. The second example is the Bolivian-Chile's gas crisis. During the administration of Bolivian President Gonzalo Sánchez de Lozada, negotiations were undertaken with Pacific LNG, consortium to ship gas to the United States and Mexico through Chile, wherever. The Bolivian population opposed to the export of gas through the Chile port. and this trigger have a protest led by Evo Morales and Felipe Quispes. The diplomatic crisis between Bolivia and Chile was based on beliefs and perception about access to gas and its sale at the price, the low price.
Now, after exploring the constructivism, it's crucial to consider one last theory, which is the critical theory. Actually, this perspective focuses on questioning the power structures and the domination in the international system.
From the perspective of the critical theory of international relations. Critical theory in international relations offers a different view on national security by questioning the power structures and dominant narratives that traditionally shape security policies. Unlike conventional theories such as realism and liberalism, critical theory focuses on how inequalities and power dynamics affect both global politics and security. First, questioning power structures. Critical theory argues that national security should not be understood only in terms of protection against external threats, but also in terms of social and economic justice. For example, security policies that favor powerful states often perpetuate inequality and insecurity in weaker states. Example: the U.S. invasion in Iraq in 2003, under the guise of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and promoting democracy, resulted in a protracted conflict that exacerbated instability in the region. Instead of achieving greater security, this invasion caused destruction, displacement of people, and power vacuum that contribute to the rise of terrorist groups like ISIS. From a critical perspective, these invasions not only fail to improve security but also perpetuate a narrative of domination and resource exploitation, primarily benefiting Western economy and political interests. Second, inequality and security. From a critical perspective, security policies often serve in interest of elites and not the general population. Critical theory asks us to consider what we mean by security. It is not only the absence of war, but also the absence of poverty, inequality, and oppression. Example: in the video Why Pakistan is a Terrorist Attraction, it mentioned how socioeconomic conditions in Pakistan, such as extreme poverty and lack of opportunities, contribute to radicalization and recruitment into terrorist groups. Critical theory suggests that instead of focusing solely on military operations against these groups, the roots of insecurity should be addressed through policies and promote economic development, education, and social equity. Thus, the attraction to terrorism could be reduced in a more sustainable and human way. Dominant narratives and discourse. Critical theory also focuses on how dominant narratives and discourses influence security policy. The media and political leaders frame certain nations or groups as threats, thus justifying aggressive policies or inventions. Example: the dominant narrative in the West about Iran is a nuclear threat has been used to justify sanctions and isolation, without fully considering Iran's legitimate security concerns. From a critical perspective, one should analyze how this narrative has been constructed and who it benefits. Economic sanctions not only affected Iranian government but also impose suffering of the civilian population, increasing poverty and inequality. A critical approach would advocate for inclusive dialogue and recognition of the security concerns of all parties resolved. Finally, alternatives to traditional security policies. Finally, critical theory advocates of alternatives to traditional security policies. This includes approaches based on international cooperation, sustainable development, and global justice, instead of focusing solely on military deterrence. It emphasizes the need to address the underlying causes of insecurity, such as poverty, inequality, and lack of access to basic resources. Example: the Paris Agreement initiative of climate change can be seen critically as an effort to address global inequalities that contribute to insecurity. The effects of climate change, such as droughts and floods, disproportionately affect developing countries, exacerbating poverty and forced migration. By committing to reduce carbon emissions and financially supporting the most vulnerable countries, it promotes a form of security that goes beyond the military, directly addressing the structural causes of insecurity. Conclusion: critical theory offers us a lens through which we can view national security more holistically and fairly. It challenges us to question who benefits from current security policies and to seek solutions that promote global justice and equality. Thank you.
After exploring now these important theories of international relations, we can appreciate the complexity and diversity of approach for understanding the global system, right? So, from realism, which highlights competition and conflict among states, to constructivism, which emphasizes the influence of ideas and identities, and also, well, the liberalism, and finally the critical theory, right, which challenges power structures and seeks justice and equity, basically, right? So each of these theories offers a valuable perspective for analyzing and understanding international dynamics, and together they allow us to obtain a more complete view of the world we live in. So it's important to recognize that no theory alone can capture the full complexity of international relations, and that each has its strengths and limitations, right? So, by considering these different perspectives, we can enrich our understanding of international system and how it works towards a more just like peaceful and an equitable world, right? So, as we reflect on the ideas presented here, I hope that we can continue to explore and debate theories of international relations to contribute a better understanding and action in the global arena. Thank you.